Liberal Viewer presents.
So, welcome to Liberal Viewer Sunday Live Clip Roundup. Thanks for joining me. I've picked out 35 of the weekend's best clips for what should be a really good show for you tonight or early this morning for a slightly delayed show. As usual, my clips come mostly from the Sunday morning news analysis shows from the big five corporate outlets of ABC, NBC, CBS, CNN, and Fox News, the so-called corporate media here in the United States. I'll also have one special political comedy clip of a surprise out-of-retirement David Letterman top 10 list that went viral on the internet over the weekend. You can see all the topics I'm covering listed down in the video description, and if you're watching this as a recorded show, you should see time indexes down there to skip to the topics that most interest you. I'll cover the ongoing 2016 presidential campaign again, this week including clips from Hillary Clinton's first big network interview as a candidate, more clips of Bernie Sanders, and of course more Donald Trump. I'll have a bunch of clips on the nuclear deal with Iran that's supposed to be announced any minute now, and one clip on the Greek bailout that was just announced, and a couple clips on race and the Confederate flag, and one at the end on cybersecurity. But first, I was very surprised and pleased to see David Letterman show up at Steve Martin and Martin Short's comedy show in San Antonio that was called A Very Stupid Conversation. And Dave talked about how happy and complacent he was in retirement until...
Complacent, I was satisfied, I was content. And then a couple of days ago, Donald Trump said he was running for president. I have made the biggest mistake of my life, ladies and gentlemen. I have.
Oh, you got. What is this, Dave?
Well, every suit I own comes with a top 10 list. By the way, nice tits.
Now, this is the top 10 list.
That's right, Paul.
Right now, Paul is doing what he's always been meant to do. He's a maitre d' in a spaceship.
A lot of people think that we would know everything by now about a man, Donald Trump, a high-profile fellow, somebody who doesn't shy away from every aspect of his life. But take a look at the list I have here tonight. Interesting facts about Donald Trump. Number 10, send him to Texas. Okay, here we go, number 10. That thing on his head was the gopher in Caddyshack. Number 9, during sex, Donald Trump calls out his own name. Number 8, Donald Trump looks like the guy on the lifeboat with the women and children. Number 7, he wants to build a wall. How about building a wall around that thing on his head? 2 jokes about the thing on his head. We've already done 6. That's right, we're only at 6. Number 6, Trump walked away from a moderately successful television show for some delusional bullshit. Oh no, wait, that's me. I don't know. Oh, number 5.
I was waiting for
Number 5. Donald Trump weighs 240 pounds. 250 with cologne. Number 4, Trump would like all Americans to know that that thing on his head is free range. I'm not free. You know, we're going to skip number 3. Okay, number 3. Send him to Texas. I saw the line outside. I was hoping it was a Spurs game. I'm from Indiana. I don't think the Pacers are still in the league. I'm from New York. I don't think the Knicks are still in the league. Number 3, if President, instead of pardoning a turkey on Thanksgiving, plans to evict the family on Thanksgiving. Now, wait a minute. Number 3, we have a tie. It's tied with, that's not a hairdo, it's a wind advisory. It's a tie. Number 2, Donald Trump has pissed off so many Mexicans, he's starring in a new movie entitled No Amigos. Number 1 interesting fact about Donald Trump, thanks to Donald Trump, the Republican mascot is also an ass. There you go.
You know, it's funny, I was just saying to my wife before I saw that clip that it was sad that David Letterman had been in retirement when Donald Trump started running for president. And I guess it also hit Dave, because Dave has had his run-ins with Donald Trump. The only thing that was kind of disappointing about that top 10 list was that it spent so much time making fun of Donald Trump's hair and didn't have a little more of the substance to it that, you know, Dave famously got in a feud with Donald Trump after saying Donald Trump was racist and for going after Barack Obama's birth certificate and calling him like or questioning whether he was born in Kenya. And so now that Donald Trump has pretty much proved himself to be a racist, it would be nice if Dave was out there making that clear on a daily basis. But there are people out there doing that. And, of course, Donald Trump himself is out there doing, I don't know, in some ways he's like, you can't even do a parody of Donald Trump. He's beyond political comedy in that he's his own political comedy, which is what I wanted to show over on NBC's Meet the Press. They had on some clips of Donald Trump's Arizona speech over the weekend. I watched a large part of his Las Vegas speech and a little part of the Arizona speech, and it's just like this weird stream of consciousness belligerence that is very loosely related to the facts. And here, I'll show you a little bit of the political comedy that I don't know, unintentional political comedy from Donald Trump that was showcased on Meet the Press yesterday morning here.
But one candidate who is having no problem making himself heard is Donald Trump. And he's focusing on one major issue, immigration. His hardline views on illegal immigrants, particularly those from Mexico, is creating a problem for the rest of the GOP field, with a party that needs to secure more of the Latino vote than Mitt Romney did if they want to win the White House. Party Chairman Reince Priebus did call Trump on Wednesday, asking him to tone down the rhetoric. Didn't seem to work. But it does seem pretty clear when it comes to immigration and the other Republicans in the race, Trump has no intention of pulling any punches. In fact, in a 70-minute monologue last night in Phoenix, Arizona, ground zero for the immigration debate, Trump took on Macy's, NASCAR, NBC, Jeb Bush, Hillary Clinton, John McCain, Caroline Kennedy. Yes, Caroline Kennedy. And the list goes on.
So I had an idea. I think it's good. Every time Mexico really intelligently sends people over, we charge Mexico $100,000 for every person they send over. USA. I wonder if the Mexican government sent them over here. I think so. I'm tied with Jeb Bush, and I said, oh, that's too bad. How can I be tied with this guy? He's terrible. He's terrible. I hire lobbyists. I have lobbyists all over the place. They're great. If I want something, go do this. I know the system better than anybody. I'm a donor. Somebody said, oh, you gave to the Democrats. Of course I give to everybody. I want to get everything done. Everybody loves me.
Okay. One of the reasons Trump...
Okay is how Chuck Todd reacted, and how else can you react to Donald Trump saying that everybody loves him when he has one of the highest disapproval ratings even amongst Republicans of all the candidates. I think the highest disapproval ratings. But that's just one of the many ways that Donald Trump isn't connected to reality. Although I want to show, here's another quick clip of, or a couple clips from Donald Trump that they also showed on Meet the Press a little closer to the beginning of the show. I think these are specifically clips of him attacking other Republicans I wanted to show here.
Anyone who thought Donald Trump might tone down his rhetoric was disabused of that notion yesterday. At a raucous speech in Phoenix, Trump made clear his goal is to promote what he calls the new silent majority. Yes, he used the phrase, and he took aim at the other candidates for president hard.
I hear like Donald Trump doesn't deserve to be on the same stage with some failed senator, failed governor, or something. It's sort of amazing, isn't it?
The scene in Phoenix turned rowdy at one point when protesters tried to disrupt Trump's speech and wound up clashing with his supporters. We're going to get to a lot of the Trump.
So I guess that was kind of a short clip of Trump attacking the other candidates maybe, but the thing that was really interesting that they showed on Meet the Press was sort of an antidote to Donald Trump as the truth teller. I mean, so many of the things he says are factually wrong, but people like him because he says what he means and he says what he believes, or that's what people, some of his supporters, breath of fresh air for. That's, I try to figure out why it is that people actually support Donald Trump. The whatever 10-15% of the Republican electorate that's putting him near the top of the polls, and because 15% gets you at the top of the polls with so many candidates. Anyway, what Meet the Press showed yesterday morning was the way Trump really isn't that much of a truth teller, that his positions have changed a lot just in a few years, and I'll talk about that a little more after you see the Trump now versus Trump then comparison that was really worth watching on Meet the Press yesterday morning here.
One of the reasons Trump is breaking through this year, though, is people feel they know where he stands. But do they? We've been looking at his positions through the years, and it would be fair to say he's evolved quite a few times on some key issues, from health care to abortion to his feelings about the top Democrat in the 2016 field.
I think Hillary would be a terrible president. She was the worst Secretary of State in the history of our nation. Why would she be a good president? Hillary Clinton, I think, is a terrific woman. I mean, I'm a little biased because I've known her for years.
You support her?
I don't want to get into this because I'll get myself into trouble, but I just like her.
That's why I asked you to see me get into trouble.
I just like her. I like her, and I like her husband. Some people would say he's incompetent. I would not say that. Yes, I would. I think Tim Geithner has done a good job. I think that the whole group has really done a good job. When you look at what's happened, I mean, at least we have an economy. You wouldn't have had an economy had they not come up with some very drastic steps 2 years ago. I'm almost more disappointed with the Republicans. They have to toughen up on Obamacare, which is a total lie and which is a total and complete disaster.
Healthcare.
A liberal on healthcare. We have to take care of people that are sick.
Universal health coverage.
I like universal. We have to take care. There's nothing else. What's the country all about if we're not going to take care of our sick? Let me tell you, everybody wants to pay as little as possible, including Warren Buffett, by the way, despite what he says. And somebody said, what's your tax rate? I don't know. I pay as little as possible. I would tax people of wealth, of great wealth, people over 10 million by 14.25%. This tax would raise approximately $5.7 trillion, which happens to be our national debt. Well, I'm very pro-life and feel strongly about it. I'm very pro-choice. I hate the concept of abortion. I hate it. I hate everything it stands for. I cringe when I listen to people debating the subject. But I just believe in choice.
Let's bring...
So that's Donald Trump, the truth teller. I think if you watch that montage of then and now clips, the only conclusion you can really come to is that Donald Trump's candidacy isn't really about some important ideology. It's about Donald Trump and whatever he wants to say on that day or this year or whatever seems to be working for him. And since he's not really an ideological candidate, one of the real dangers is that he is just in there for the macho takedowns of other candidates. He seems to really go after several of them. I'm going to show a clip of a direct interview that Anderson Cooper did with Donald Trump that aired earlier on this week on CNN or last week on CNN, and then they played a clip of it on CNN State of the Union talking about Jeb Bush, Marco Rubio, and then actually something positive about Ted Cruz in this clip.
You what some of your fellow Republicans have said. Bush says Trump is wrong in this. He's doing this. He's not a stupid guy. Don't think he thinks every Mexican crossing the border is a rapist. He's doing this to inflame and incite and to draw attention.
So look, Bush is weak on immigration. Forget about his stance on Common Core, which is a total disaster. He's very weak on immigration, and that's his prerogative if he wants to be.
Marco Rubio, Trump's comments are not just offensive and inaccurate, but also divisive.
Marco Rubio is somebody who is extremely weak on immigration. He all of a sudden toughens his stance because his poll numbers went down. If he ever got elected, you would have people flowing across the border.
Ted Cruz, who has backed you up on immigration?
Well, I have great respect for the fact that he had the courage to back me up and to say that what I'm saying is right. And all I'm saying, and all he's saying, is that we have to stop illegal immigration.
How much has this cost you?
So I'm not going to show the answer where he asked, or the answer from Donald Trump where Anderson Cooper asked him how much the whole race has cost him. But some say it's cost him millions of dollars based on all these companies leaving him, although some of those I'm not sure are that costly. But it sounds like Donald Trump is actually going to show how much money he has and file financial disclosures sometime before the Fox News debate, because that's going to be one of the requirements. The Fox News debate is about 3 weeks away, and Donald Trump is apparently going to be on that stage, and when he files his financial disclosures, maybe we'll find out exactly how much money he's losing. I want to show how a lot of the one of the reasons I'm spending so much time covering Trump is because the media has really focused in on him. On CNN State of the Union, they the entire beginning of the program was all the introduction to the 1 hour program was entirely focused on Donald Trump, and I think that's I'm a little worried about playing this clip, but we'll see after I play it here.
I'm Dana Bash in Washington, where the state of our union is trumped. The billionaire dominated the week, swinging through the political establishment like a wrecking ball. His comments about undocumented immigrants raised hackles and roiled corporate giants. But make no mistake about it, plenty of people like what they hear. Last night in Phoenix, several thousand people showed up to watch a rollicking and at times rambling hour-long diatribe that was part politics, part performance art.
The poll just came out, and I'm tied with Jeb Bush. And I said, oh, that's too bad. How can I be tied with this guy? He's terrible. He's terrible.
This week, the head of the Republican National Committee asked Trump to tone it down, to no avail, leaving the grand old party fretting over how to manage their unlikely breakout star. Joining me now from New Hampshire is fellow Republican presidential candidate and South Carolina Senator Lindsey Graham. Senator, thanks for joining me this morning. I want to start off with the fact that, look, a lot of people in your party are trying to laugh off Donald Trump, but when he gets those kinds of crowds, you have to take him seriously, don't you?
Well, I'm very worried about where we're headed as a party. I don't think this is the way to get the Latino vote. At the end of the day, this is a defining moment for the Republican Party. There's a lot of frustration with broken borders. I get that. I've been trying to fix the border for 10 years. I would double the Border Patrol, triple the number of drones. All the hijackers who attacked us on 9/11 were visa overstays. So it's more than just the border. You got to control your visa program. But as to Donald Trump, he has said openly, repeatedly, that he believes that most illegal immigrants are drug dealers and rapists, and there may be a few among them that are decent people. After 10 years of working on illegal immigration, I've come to conclude that most illegal immigrants are decent, hardworking people, and some are criminals. This is a defining moment for the Republican Party. We need to reject this. To all the candidates who think that Donald Trump is telling the truth, I think you've lost your way. As to the Republican Party, if we do not reject this way of thinking clearly, without any ambiguity, we'll have lost our way. We'll have lost the moral authority, in my view, to govern this great nation, and I hope we will reject this kind of thinking.
But how do you do that? Look, he talked about the fact that he is awakening a new silent majority. And the fact is that when he talks about building a wall and sending undocumented immigrants back to Mexico, that has a lot of appeal with a lot of people in your party, and you know that.
Well, I can tell you the majority of my party wants to secure the border, control who gets a job. They come here to work. What happened in San Francisco is appalling. It's a good example of why you need to fix the system. But to say that all the 11 million illegal immigrants, for the most part, are rapists and drug dealers is not only offensive at every level, you're telling the Hispanic community who are friends, neighbors, and relatives of the illegal immigrant population exactly what we think of you. And I'm not going to be part of that.
So when Senator Lindsey Graham of South Carolina is the voice of reason, you know that something is terribly, terribly wrong. And I guess it's Donald Trump who's terribly, terribly wrong. And Lindsey Graham points out his criminalization of immigrants or of undocumented immigrants just doesn't fit the facts. You know, Lindsey Graham says it's based on his experience, but there are several different studies that show that immigrants and even undocumented immigrants commit crimes at a lower rate than native-born Americans, and it's not even that much of a question, but unless, I guess, you're Donald Trump. And with Senator Lindsey Graham sounding like the voice of reason, that's actually one of the dangers, I think, or at least one of the dangers Democrats may see from this generally really positive thing politically for Democrats, that Donald Trump is sort of taking over the media spotlight for the Republican Party. But I want to show one quick clip from the Hillary Clinton interview that was on CNN. I'm going to show some more clips when I get over to the Democratic side, but this is Hillary Clinton actually responding to a question from Brianna Keilar, the CNN reporter who had the extended interview with her. And Brianna Keilar asked her about Donald Trump and actually about her friendship with Donald Trump, because as I showed in those Meet the Press clips, Donald Trump then and now, Donald Trump actually used to be a supporter of the Clintons. And Hillary Clinton not only says she's disappointed in Donald Trump, she tries really hard to wrap him around the other Republican candidates and his view on immigration being not that different from the other Republicans. As you can see, Hillary Clinton say to Brianna Keilar on CNN State of the Union, or on CNN, in a CNN interview from earlier last week that was played on CNN State of the Union yesterday here.
Donald Trump is also creating quite a lot of commotion on the other side. He's a friend of yours, has been over the years. He donated to your Senate campaign, to the Clinton Foundation. What's your reaction to his recent comments that some Mexican immigrants are rapists and criminals?
I'm very disappointed in those comments, and I feel very bad and very disappointed with him and with the Republican Party for not responding immediately and saying enough, stop it. But they are all in the same general area on immigration. They don't want to provide a path to citizenship. They range across a spectrum of being either grudgingly welcome or hostile toward immigrants.
But what about Jeb Bush's approach to that? It's different, certainly, than Donald Trump's.
Well, he doesn't believe in a path to citizenship. If he did at one time, he no longer does.
Have you given any thought?
So, like I said, in that clip, Hillary Clinton tries to make sure that people understand that the position of Jeb Bush on immigration isn't that far from the position of Donald Trump. None of the candidates I don't think anyone is explicitly, none of the Republican candidates is explicitly for a path to citizenship for undocumented immigrants, which if that means that the 11 million, 14 million, however many undocumented immigrants there are in the United States don't have a way to be legal. That means they're, even if they, or don't have a way to be citizens, even if they have a path to becoming legal in some way, that still makes them sort of second-class citizens, workers who can't vote, basically. And a lot of them have views that are closer to Donald Trump's, which are vilifying the undocumented immigrants. And just as Hillary Clinton was trying to make sure that people saw Jeb Bush and Donald Trump as close together as possible, over on Fox News Sunday, they did the opposite. They tried to point out the differences between Jeb Bush and Donald Trump. And of course, they are fighting each other, and that's what Fox News Sunday concentrated on. And this is before their panel discussion, but I just wanted to show, it's a clip they showed of Donald Trump attacking Jeb Bush, and then Bret, who was the guest host of Fox News Sunday earlier last week, had an interview with Jeb Bush, and so they show how Jeb Bush responds to the attacks from Donald Trump and says he's not going to talk about Donald Trump anymore, but by the end he does talk about Donald Trump again over in this clip.
The poll just came out, and I'm tied with Jeb Bush, and I said, oh, that's too bad. How can I be tied with this guy? He's terrible. He's terrible. He's weak on immigration. Do you know the sanctuary cities? Do you know he had 5 of them in Florida while he was governor? Can you believe this? I didn't know that.
Donald Trump referencing his rise in the polls that shows him in a close race with Jeb Bush before a crowd of thousands Saturday in Phoenix. And we're back now with the panel. You know, Britt, I talked to Jeb Bush earlier this week in New Hampshire. I asked him about Donald Trump. Take a quick listen. Donald Trump, is he bad for the GOP?
I've already stated my views about Donald Trump.
You're done?
I'm done.
You're through?
I'm through. I gave my views. I just think that we need to be much more hopeful and optimistic about our ideology. We have the winning ideology. Limited government, personal responsibility, individual liberty creates more prosperity and more advantages than any other form of political philosophy. We should focus on that and not get into a food fight that only brings energy to someone who I doubt will be president and is not a constructive force for our party.
Not a...
So Jeb Bush, after saying he wasn't going to talk about Donald Trump anymore, did talk about Donald Trump and said he's, not a constructive force for the party. He's not going to be president. And I don't know. It should be interesting if, I think it's August 5th is the first Republican debate, the Fox News debate from Cleveland, Ohio. That should be, it's right around that time if I don't have the exact date right. And it'll be interesting to see how Jeb Bush and Donald Trump behave together on a stage with, I guess they're going to have the top 10 candidates. I look forward to that, and I will be covering that on my Sunday clip roundup, I'm sure, in just a few weeks. But I want to show one of the best responses to Donald Trump was actually from one of Hillary Clinton's new Democratic rivals, former Senator and former Secretary of the Navy, it was Secretary of Defense also, I think, Jim Webb, who just joined the race and had an exclusive interview on Fox News Sunday. And during his interview where he was talking about Iran, or I think he was talking about giving arms to the Ukrainians, he stopped and just spontaneously volunteered a comment on Donald Trump, which I thought was a little strange. But then he had this big emotional jujitsu moment where I think he came up with one of the best ways to respond to Donald Trump's emotionalism is to find some reverse emotionalism that counteracts him, which I think he did over in this clip.
May I say something about this situation with Mr. Trump?
Of course.
I think the best comment that I have read in terms of why this is so inflammatory with the Mexican-American community comes from an individual who served with me in Vietnam and during some very tough combat, Oscar Munoz, who's a Mexican-American, a very fine soldier, as are so many of them. And he wrote a letter to Mr. Trump, and he allowed me to post it on my Facebook page. And I hope anyone who cares about this issue will take a look at what he said. And he basically said, "Dear Mr. Trump, My father came from Mexico as a worker, not as a rapist. And by the way, I served my country in the United States Marine Corps. Where were you? So, you know, this kind of divisive, inflammatory rhetoric by people who want to be commander-in-chief is not helpful. And we've seen from the liberal side as well, we've seen this kind of rhetoric as it goes to the southern white cultures. We need to be inclusive, recognize that we have problems, that we can come together to solve them, but don't be throwing these bombs toward cultural groups.
Well, to your point,
I thought that was really cool. The little emotional jujitsu I was talking about before, where he talks about the Mexican Vietnam vet whose father came here as a worker, not a rapist, and he defended his country. Where were you, Donald Trump? That's a good way to deal with someone like Donald Trump, I think. But that part at the end where he compared anti-immigrant feeling to sentiments on the left against, I guess it's white Southern culture, he expanded on that a little more. And of course, as always, there's a link down in the video description where for all the shows that I take the clips from, so you can watch the entire Fox News Sunday online and look at the entire Jim Webb interview. And he talks a little more about how he thinks people should be more respectful of white Southern culture in this whole Confederate flag debate, although he doesn't say that the Confederate flag should have stayed up in the grounds of the South Carolina statehouse. But I thought it was an interesting attack on Donald Trump, but I'm not sure the whole white Southern culture thing is something I go for. I don't think it's really a good analogy, but that's the last clip I'm going to show on Donald Trump, pretty much. I think that's probably the last Donald Trump clip. I don't think he's ever mentioned any of these other clips, but I do have a few more clips on the Republican side before I get over to the Democratic side, where I have clips of Hillary Clinton and Bernie Sanders, and maybe one more Jim Webb. I think there's one more Jim Webb clip as well. But before I get to that, I want to show a few other of Republican candidates. First, Bobby Jindal, governor of Louisiana, is not even in the top 10 yet to be in that Fox News debate, but he was over on Fox News, and I thought the guest host, Bret Baier, actually asked him a pretty difficult question about his strange way of making it look like he wasn't raising taxes when he really was raising taxes, and I'll talk about that a little more if you see that clip over here.
You've done that. You've tried to pass a plan. You passed a plan that many looked at as a way to keep a presidential campaign promise by not raising taxes, in consultation with Grover Norquist, with the Americans for Tax Reform. The Citizens for Tax Justice explained it this way, where the revenue came from, how a governor can raise taxes without violating a no-tax pledge. Governor Jindal's created a Rube Goldberg-like budget gimmick. Governor Jindal passed a massive increase in college fees, which he then exactly offset with a new tax credit, resulting in no actual increase in costs for students. Because college fee increases do not technically count as a tax under Grover Norquist's formula, Governor Jindal could claim that the tax credit, half of his plan, was a substantial new tax cut. Jindal could then sign an increase in the actual taxes, including cigarette taxes and other levies, without violating the pledge under the dubious claim that the tax portion of this package was revenue neutral. Isn't that, Governor, the kind of stuff that Republicans hate about Washington?
Bret, a couple of things. One, I'm proud that we sound a tax credit, a tax cut for working families paying tuition. Look, in a lot of states, tuition is going up. In Louisiana, we have the second lowest tuition in the South. We are one of the best states when it comes to students graduating with student debt. This is a huge problem nationally. Secondly, I would match my record against anybody in terms of actually cutting government. We're not slowing the growth rate. We've actually cut government. Our budget is $9 billion smaller than we took office. We're not talking about 30,000 positions, 30,000 fewer people working for state government than the day I took office. In D.C., even the Republicans talk about just slowing the growth rate of government. We've actually cut the size of government. We've actually grown the private sector economy. I know the left always wants to raise taxes. That's not the way to answer our problems. In Louisiana, we privatized our state charity hospital system. We've got statewide school choice where the dollars follow the child instead of the child following the dollars. In New Orleans, nearly 100% of our kids are in charter schools, doubling the number doing reading and math on grade level in 5 years. I think those are the kinds of conservative reforms. We need a doer, not a talker. There are a lot of Republicans that talk about fiscal
I understand all that, but when I go to the
we've actually done it.
specifics, and some of it, people glaze over, but when it's budget specifics and you're doing one thing and talking about one thing, just so that you can say that you didn't raise a tax, but it's a fee, isn't that stuff that Republicans hate?
Bret, no, there's actually a tax credit. There's a tax cut for families whose kids are going to universities in Louisiana. That's an actual tax credit. That's a tax cut. The bottom line is the record's clear. Our budget is smaller than when we started. We've cut taxes, not raised taxes. We've got more people working in the private sector. What we don't see happening in D.C. is, look, they said give us the Republican majority and they would repeal Obamacare, balance the budget, cut federal spending. That's not happening in D.C.
One last thing, Governor.
So that was a pretty feeble answer, I thought, from Republican Governor of Louisiana, Bobby Jindal. I don't think he's going to be a great candidate because that was all like talking points, all mushed together. It's almost like he was vaguely aware of the question that Baier asked him, but I think there was about one sentence in there that actually responded to the question. There was his answer and then a follow-up and his answer, and only in the follow-up did he say something like, it was a tax credit, which, of course, if you look at Bret Baier's question, which wasn't a bad question, he pointed out that the tax credit part was just part of this whole deception that made it look like there was no increase in taxes when there really was an increase in taxes hidden in these fees. But anyway, that's the only clip I want to show you of Bobby Jindal, because I don't think he's that viable a candidate. And another fairly non-viable candidate who's just under the top 10 at the moment in the polls to get in the Fox News debate is Carly Fiorina, who used to be the head of Hewlett-Packard and got fired and then didn't make it as a senator here in California, ran for Senate as a Republican and lost. But first I'll start with the introduction that ABC's This Week with George Stephanopoulos had before an interview with her. This gives a little bit of her background, mentions that she was fired at Hewlett-Packard and that she lost for Senate in California. And anyway, here's a little background on Carly Fiorina here.
Thank you. And that brings us to our next guest, GOP presidential candidate Carly Fiorina. She broke through the glass ceiling at computer giant Hewlett-Packard, the first female CEO of a top 20 U.S. company. After getting fired in a boardroom shakeup, Fiorina's California Senate bid failed in 2010. But with trademark tenacity, she's reaching higher than ever.
I'm Carly Fiorina, and I'm running for president.
The only woman in a sprawling GOP field, touting her corporate experience.
I understand how the economy actually works.
Her personal journey.
I'm a cancer survivor.
And taking on Hillary.
Unlike her, I've actually accomplished something.
That's earning her good reviews at early campaign stops. The big question now, can all that energy boost her poll numbers and buy her a ticket to those first debates?
So that was the background segment that This Week with George Stephanopoulos showed before an interview with Carly Fiorina, and I don't really want to show much of that interview, kind of like Bobby Jindal. I don't think she's a really viable candidate, although I guess several pundits say she's running for vice president, and that kind of makes sense because she's a woman, and if Hillary Clinton's going to be the nominee, then the Republicans going to have a woman to attack a woman. So, because Republicans don't think men should attack women because they have these sort of outdated sexist attitudes where they want to look like gentlemen in the political arena. I guess I don't know. Maybe that's what the pundits theorize. You can let me know what you think about that. But before I leave Carly Fiorina, I did want to show one clip of her interview with George Stephanopoulos, because in this clip they actually show Jeb Bush's big gaffe from this last week, where he basically said that Americans should be working longer hours or working harder, or if he's elected, we'll have 4% growth because Americans will be able to work harder. And then in context, some people said on the Sunday shows that what he really meant was that part-time people should be able to work, people who are working part-time involuntarily should be able to work full-time if they want to. And that is probably what he meant, but it came out pretty badly, and it's not his first gaffe in the campaign. If you remember his whole, would you have invaded Iraq of knowing everything we know now thing, Anyway, here's how Carly Fiorina answered George Stephanopoulos' question about what Jeb Bush said, and it's some small business talking points that you can hear from just about any Republican out there, but here it is.
Let's talk about the economy right now. Jeb Bush, one of your opponents in this primary race, has set out a goal of 4% economic growth, and he caused quite a stir this week with this statement.
Workforce participation has to rise from its all-time modern lows. Means that people need to work longer hours and through their productivity gain more income for their families.
That phrase, need to work longer hours, drew a lot of criticism from many fronts, including from the campaign of Ted Cruz, who said it would seem to me that Governor Bush would want to avoid the kind of comments that led voters to believe that Governor Romney was out of touch with the economic struggles many Americans are facing. What did you think of that comment from Governor Bush, and do you agree with his goal of 4% growth?
Well, I think 4% growth is a good goal. And I think the fact that we have become used to an economy that sort of puts along at between 1% and 2% is sort of tragic. I think we need to understand what the true engine of economic growth and job creation is in this country. It has always been small businesses, new businesses, family-owned businesses, community-based businesses that create 2/3 of the jobs and employ half the people. And we are now crushing those businesses. In fact, we are destroying more businesses in the United States now than are being created for the first time in our history. Meanwhile, crony capitalism is alive and well. The big are getting bigger, the wealthy are getting wealthier, because with a very large, powerful, complicated government, which is what we have and which Democrats want more of, only the big, the powerful, the wealthy, and the well-connected can survive. Americans who have jobs are working longer and longer hours. Those who are working part-time want to work full-time. We're tangling people's lives up in webs of dependence who would like to move forward in their lives, only our programs incent them to fall back into those webs. So yes, we need to grow this economy, but that begins by understanding where growth and job creation come from, and that's the small, the new, the family-owned businesses, the community-based businesses. Those are being crushed by the weight and the power of this federal government.
Well, what do you think? Does that sound like someone who's running to be Jeb Bush's vice president? I mean, she certainly didn't take the opportunity to attack Jeb Bush at all for making that gaffe, even if it might have made sense if you twist it around a little and apply it to the involuntary part-time workers, like I was saying before the clip. But sounds like it's not a bad answer. I just don't think she's that viable a candidate, as I explained before I showed the clip. And as is pretty much explained in the introduction from George Stephanopoulos, how she hasn't really been that successful in business or in politics, so I'm not sure what her basis for running for president is. But, Jeb Bush isn't even necessarily the front runner. The person who is supposed to announce today that he's running for president, Wisconsin Governor Scott Walker, in some polls, he's the front runner, especially in Iowa, since that's close to Wisconsin. And I wanted to show this really in-depth profile of Wisconsin Governor Scott Walker that they played at the end of CNN's State of the Union yesterday morning. The show was guest hosted by Dana Bash, and she actually started off talking about how Scott Walker mentions his two sons, Matt and Alex, in so many of his speeches that it's become kind of a drinking game in Wisconsin. And then she actually asks Scott Walker's son, Matt and Alex, about the drinking game, which I thought was kind of funny. And then they talk about their father, and she talks to a local radio talk show host and to Scott Walker's lieutenant governor. This whole thing is, I think it's just a little under 5 minutes, but Scott Walker is apparently going to be the front runner, or maybe it's hard to tell with all the polls so close and so many candidates. Like I said, 15% makes you the front runner in some of these polls. So Scott Walker is what the pundits say is, they say that Scott Walker, Jeb Bush, Marco Rubio, and possibly John Kasich, that's the conventional wisdom, is the top 3 or 4. So here's a in-depth background on Scott Walker from CNN State of the Union. Dana Bash first talking to Scott Walker's sons, Alex and Matt, in this clip.
Tomorrow, Wisconsin Governor Scott Walker officially enters the 2016 race, and he's already leading the pack in the latest poll in Iowa. Aside from the public brawl with his state's labor unions, Walker's had a limited national exposure. We thought you might want to get to know him better, so we headed to Wisconsin and talked to some folks who know him best. Scott Walker's sons are a staple of his stump speech.
My sons, Matt and Alex. Our sons, Matt and Alex. My reasons are Matt and Alex.
So much that we were told someone in Wisconsin made up a Matt and Alex drinking game. Every time he says Matt and Alex, you take a drink.
I didn't know that. It's pretty funny.
Now it's the 21 and almost 20-year-olds' turn to talk about their dad on the eve of his presidential announcement.
We've seen his leadership. We've seen that he can get things done.
What Walker did as governor in 2011 shot him to national prominence, trying to cut state spending by curbing collective bargaining and breaking state unions. It made him a hero to the right and the devil to the left. Passions ran so high through a failed attempt to recall Walker, his then high school-aged sons say they faced death threats.
We got a lot of those threats. We were able to just keep calm, work through them. In the end, we got closer.
But their mother, Tanette, also gave her husband tough love, telling him he wasn't communicating well.
She tried to ask our dad to explain to people more what the reforms did and what he was doing.
Walker's wife is 12 years his senior. How they met at this bar says a lot about his personality. Self-assured and at times a bit awkward.
He wrote on a napkin, "Forgive me for being rude, but I've got to work early in the morning. But if you'd like to go out sometime, give me a call." And he put his number down and his name. And he slipped through the napkin on the way out.
The Walkers are close, but even they disagree on some politics. Matt and Alex support same-sex marriage and complained to their mother when their dad called last month's Supreme Court decision legalizing it a grave mistake. She said to you all, when you complained, go talk to your father about it. Did you?
Yeah, we talked to him. Like any family, we had disagreements. He just explained his position, and that was it. Matt and I aren't necessarily changing his stances on any issues.
Did you try?
No, we respect his opinion on things.
Walker's intense political ambition began as a teenager. He lost a bid to be student body president at Marquette University and dropped out before graduating.
He was getting an offer job before he even left, so why would he not take it?
What would he say if either of you said, you know what, Dad? I'm done. I'm not going to finish college.
He might be all right with it if we told him we had a good reason. Our mom, on the other hand, would not allow that.
The overwhelming
Walker was elected to the state assembly at age 25. He's been a career politician since, but not always a political star.
Scott is one of those guys that does not fill up the room. He's not going to blow you away. He comes off as very intense, very thoughtful.
Charlie Sykes is a Wisconsin conservative radio host, where Walker was a regular guest as he moved up through elected office.
He is his own number one strategist. He is his own number one spokesman. He is his own media person.
Some would say that's micromanaging.
Oh, I think everybody would say that it's micromanaging.
And he's even-keeled, apparently no temper. Rebecca Cleefish is Walker's lieutenant governor. Have you ever seen that at all? Nope. Not even during those intense recall moments.
I was floored by his calm. You know that he's a man of deep faith.
Walker is a preacher's son. Faith guides him spiritually and helps politically with Christian conservative voters he needs, especially in Iowa.
We don't go into meetings and quote scripture. I think that's what a lot of people assume of evangelicals, right? But you can see how he cares deeply.
Before Cleefish ran for office, she was a reporter who covered Walker.
When we're in a public meeting versus when the door is closed, same guy. And I know that's weird.
For his sons, that typical guy also means dorky dad.
A little embarrassing sometimes. He likes to sing karaoke, definitely. It embarrassed Matt and I.
They're not the only ones.
He has a tendency to sing.
What does he sing?
He sang Happy.
How'd that go?
Politics is really good for him.
But worse for his sons are his clothes.
The big one is that he wears jean shorts sometimes, and that's a little rough. So
Really?
Fashion choices need to be updated.
But dressing like a pirate when they were kids, not so bad.
And that's just how he's always been, and he's shown the example for us.
Little fun there.
Well, that was a fairly good background report, although I'm not sure why it focused so much on Matt and Alex there. I mean, of course, his sons support him. You would expect the children of the candidate to support the candidate. Although, I guess that's one of the ways we examine our candidates here in the United States for quite a while now, is to examine their families, and they always have them standing on the stage. So I guess the interviews aren't, for what they say, they're like 20 and 21, so they're at at the verge of adulthood or adulthood. 18 is basically adulthood, 21 total adulthood here in the United States. So I guess it's okay to interview them. I was just thinking how President Obama's never had interviews with his children. They've participated slightly in some events, but they're not quite that age yet. So that is the last clip I want to show on the Republican side of the 2016 presidential race, which is, like I said, there's actually a debate coming up in a few weeks, and after Labor Day, that's another few weeks after that is when the primary season really supposedly starts for the 2016 campaign. So it's almost at a point where it's not too early to talk about anymore, and I want to now show several clips on the Democratic side, a couple of Hillary Clinton, some from Bernie Sanders, and then one more of Jim Webb. And those are three of the candidates on the Democratic side. There's also Martin O'Malley and Lincoln Chafee, though Hillary Clinton seems to be the prohibitive favorite. She has more money and more name recognition, and she's way ahead in all the polls. Although Bernie Sanders is starting to come a little bit close in Iowa and New Hampshire. But I want to show first Hillary Clinton responding to her one of the so-called scandals that's been dogging her lately on her emails, and I didn't think she answered the question very well, and she actually said something that's technically not true, although it's kind of like what Jeb Bush said, where if you twist it a little and understand what he and she were trying to say, then it does make sense and it is true. But I'll explain that after you watch that clip here.
Voter.
One of the issues that has eroded some trust that we've seen is the issue of your email practices while you were Secretary of State. I think there's a lot of people who don't understand what your thought process was on that. So can you tell me the story of how you decided to delete 33,000 emails and how that deletion was executed?
Well, let's start from the beginning. Everything I did was permitted. There was no law, there was no regulation, there was nothing that did not give me the full authority to decide how I was going to communicate. Previous secretaries of state have said they did the same thing, and people across the government knew that I used one device. Maybe it was because I am not the most technically capable person and wanted to make it as easy as possible.
But you said that they did the same thing, that they used a personal server and
well,
while facing
email.
a subpoena, deleted emails from them?
You know, you're starting with so many assumptions that I've never had a subpoena. There is nothing. Again, let's take a deep breath here. Everything I did was permitted by law and regulation. I had one device. When I mailed anybody in the government, it would go into the government system. Now, I didn't have to turn over anything. I chose to turn over 55,000 pages because I wanted to go above and beyond what was expected of me, because I knew the vast majority of everything that was official already was in the State Department system.
Let's talk.
Now, actually, that answer did not give me a whole lot of confidence, because I didn't do anything illegal or against any regulation isn't really the best answer. If you're saying I didn't break the law, you're not in a really good place politically, I don't think. And the one thing she said there that is technically untrue is that she never got a subpoena when, in fact, the House committee that's investigating Benghazi, or Trey Gowdy, the new Benghazi investigative chair, did send her a subpoena back in March. Now, I think what she meant there is that when she deleted the emails, there wasn't a subpoena, because of course you can't delete evidence when there's a subpoena for the evidence, and all that, her decision to scrub parts of her server, that all occurred well before March, but it wasn't true that she never had a subpoena, and that's just more grist for the Fox News mill. I heard them over, since that interview with Brianna Keilar came out earlier in the week, they were on that like white on rice, or I don't know, use your own whatever expression you want to use. They were really churning out the anti-Hillary talking points over on Fox News, just based on that one never had a subpoena comment. So that is not a strong answer from someone who is already supposed to be the Democratic candidate for president. I hope that Hillary Clinton does more big network interviews and gets a little bit better at giving her answers. And I want to show one more clip from that interview before I get to Bernie Sanders. This is actually Hillary Clinton talking about how she feels about Bernie Sanders and the excitement that some people on the left have for Bernie Sanders, and if she sees Bernie Sanders as a threat. And that's just a little under a minute. Also from CNN State of the Union, or like I said, it's this interview that Brianna Keilar did earlier in the week that was played in large part on State of the Union yesterday morning here.
Bernie Sanders, who's been giving Clinton a run for her money on the trail with his huge crowds and his populist message. But when she sat down with CNN's Brianna Keilar for her first national TV interview, Clinton insisted there's no bad blood.
Well, first of all, I always thought this would be a competitive race, so I am happy to have a chance to get out and run my campaign as I see fit and let other candidates do exactly the same. I feel very good about where we are in Iowa. We are signing up thousands of volunteers, people committed to caucus for us. We have a committed supporter in every one of the 1,600 precincts. And one of the things that I learned last time is it's organize, organize, organize. So I couldn't be happier about my campaign.
She gave a little sort of terse smile or a tense smile there at the end and said she couldn't be happier, but I got the feeling maybe she could be happier. What do you think? You let me know down in the comment sections. Could Hillary Clinton be happier? I think she could be happier. And one of the reasons I think she could be happier is because of this next clip I'm going to show. Senator Bernie Sanders has done a bunch of these interviews on the Sunday morning news analysis shows that I cover on my clip roundup, and this is an answer you may have seen given in a similar way before, but it's Bernie Sanders saying that he won't attack Hillary Clinton, but he will distinguish himself from Hillary Clinton on several issues, and this is in response to a question from John Dickerson on CBS's Face the Nation yesterday morning over here.
Speaker John Boehner on. He said he came to Congress with a lot of the issues you've mentioned, both on wages and income inequality, are going to be the topic of a speech by Hillary Clinton, your opponent in the Democratic fight, on Monday. How do you distinguish yourself from her for Democratic voters out there?
Okay, first of all, let me say this, John. I have known Hillary Clinton since she was First Lady. I've known her for 25 years. I like Hillary Clinton and I respect Hillary Clinton. And I'm not going to engage in personal attacks against Hillary Clinton. But there are differences of opinion that we have, which should be the basis for a serious discussion. Number one, I have spent my political life taking on the big money interests. I have introduced legislation that would break up the large financial institutions on Wall Street. I think if a bank is too big to fail, it is too big to exist. I voted against the war in Iraq. And if you go to YouTube and you look at what I said way back when, sadly enough, much of what I predicted actually happened. Hillary Clinton voted for the war. I believe, along with Pope Francis, that climate change is one of the great international crises that we face. I have worked as hard as I can to kill the Keystone Pipeline
program. You'll have to ask Hillary Clinton what her view is on that. She has not been very clear. So I think on issue after issue, whether it's raising the minimum wage to $15 an hour, whether it is the trade agreement, I oppose TPP, she has not been clear on it. There are very significant differences of opinion that we have.
Senator Sanders.
So that is, I'd like to see a debate between Bernie Sanders and Hillary Clinton, and I guess, like I said before, the other people on that stage at the moment would be Jim Webb, Lincoln Chafee, and Martin O'Malley. But I'd especially like to see the debate between Senator Bernie Sanders and Hillary Clinton based on those issues that you just heard him outline in that answer. And in terms of Bernie Sanders' response to Republicans, and if you were watching closely, I mistakenly played this clip for a few seconds when I was supposed to be playing that last clip. This is John Dickerson asking Bernie Sanders about something that Speaker of the House John Boehner said earlier on the show. I'm not going to show that John Boehner clip, although I will have a John Boehner clip later when I talk about the deal with Iran. That I don't know can anyone tell me in the comment section, has there been a deal with Iran announced while I've been broadcasting? Because last time I looked before I started the show, it was still imminent but not announced, unlike the Greek bailout. But now I'm getting off topic. This is Senator Bernie Sanders responding to something Speaker of the House John Boehner said about both Bernie Sanders and Hillary Clinton being big tax Democrats. You know, they're out of the mainstream. They never saw a tax that they didn't like. He tried to do what Hillary Clinton was doing with Donald Trump and wrapping Donald Trump around Jeb Bush. Well, John Boehner was trying to wrap Bernie Sanders around Hillary Clinton as big tax socialists, and here's how Bernie Sanders responded to that attack from Speaker of the House John Boehner, as relayed by John Dickerson on Face the Nation here.
Speaker John Boehner on. He said he came to Congress with you, and that he characterized you by saying that there's not a tax increase that you haven't liked. What's your response to that? He says you're out of the mainstream of America.
All right. Well, let me respond to that issue by issue, and you determine who's out of the mainstream. I want to raise the minimum wage to $15 an hour. Recent Wall Street Journal poll said a majority of the American people want to do that. John Boehner is not going to even bring up any legislation in the House to raise the minimum wage at all, and many of his members want to do away with the concept of the minimum wage. I want to see this country expand Social Security benefits, not cut them. John Boehner and his party want to either privatize Social Security or cut Social Security benefits for the elderly and disabled vets. The American people say overwhelmingly we have got to expand Social Security benefits by lifting the cap on taxable incomes. I want to create millions of jobs by rebuilding our crumbling infrastructure, and have introduced legislation to do that. Republican Party is very reluctant to spend a nickel to rebuild our infrastructure.
Senator,
So I think in terms, John, of who's out of touch with the American people, I would say the Republican Party is. They want to give tax breaks to billionaires, not help the middle class.
So that's actually a pretty good answer, I thought, from Senator Bernie Sanders, not for the Democratic primary, but responding to a Republican and saying that, the whole out of the mainstream big tax Democrat charge, and turning around in terms of being out of the mainstream on the minimum wage, because there are so many issues where Democrats are for middle class people and working class people, and it's the Republicans who've stopped many policies that help those. Minimum wage is just one of many that I'm not going to go into, but I do want to get to the next Bernie Sanders clip where he talks about why it is that he's going to win and why he's going to be successful as president. And, I think he's definitely a long shot candidate. I know that there are a lot of people on the left who are getting Bernie mania or whatever you want to call it. And I still think the chances are Hillary Clinton is going to be the Democratic nominee, but You can listen to his answer here about it. And while I'm not really sure I agree with what he says about how he's going to be elected president, what he says about what he needs to be successful as president, I do agree with, as I'll discuss after you see that clip over here.
Now to how you take your ideas and make them a reality in a political system. Let me read you something that Bill Shaheen, who's the husband of one of your colleagues, said about Hillary Clinton and why he supports Hillary Clinton. He said, speaking of you and Hillary Clinton, we all want the same things, but the question in the final analysis is who's going to be the person who is going to deliver it for you? In other words, like what you're saying, but you're just not going to be able to deliver in Washington. What's the answer?
Well, the answer is I will be able to deliver in Washington. I will be able to win the election, and I'll tell you why. Because we are going to bring more people into the process. I'm going to be going around the country, not only to blue states, John, but to red states, conservative states. We're going to go to Alabama. We're going to go to Mississippi. We're going to go to conservative states. We're going to talk about poverty in this country. The fact that we have 45 million people living in poverty and the highest rate of childhood poverty of any major country. And we're going to get young people and we're going to get working people excited and involved in the political process. We're going to grow voter turnout. The reason the Republicans did so well last election, 63% of the American people didn't vote. I think the message that we have is resonating. People are going to get involved in the political process. We're going to drive turnout up. And when we do that, we win.
Senator, that sounds exactly like what we heard from Senator Barack Obama. Build a movement, change Washington. You don't think it worked in that case. Why is it going to work with you?
Here's what I said. John, here's what, well, it worked in getting Barack Obama getting elected. And let me be clear. I think that in 2008, Barack Obama ran one of the great campaigns in the history of the United States of America, an extraordinary grassroots campaign. Here is the mistake that Barack Obama made, and I am a friend of Barack Obama's, have a lot of respect for him, although we disagree on a number of issues. What he did after the election is what he said to the millions of people who were so excited about his campaign. He said, hey, thank you very much for electing me. I will take it from here. I'll sit down with John Boehner. I will sit down with Mitch McConnell. I'll sit down with the Republicans, and I'm going to negotiate some fair compromises. The truth is, the Republicans never wanted to negotiate. All they wanted to do was obstruct. What I have said throughout this campaign, electing Bernie Sanders as president is not enough. Not going to do it. We need a mass grassroots movement that looks the Republicans in the eye and says, if you don't vote to demand that your wealthy people start paying their fair share of taxes, if you don't vote for jobs and raising the minimum wage and expanding Social Security, we know what's going on. We're involved. We're organized. You are out of here if you don't do the right thing. That is the only way we can take on the billionaire class.
So I thought that was a generally good answer from Bernie Sanders on the need for grassroots organizing, because I was a little disappointed with the way President Barack Obama did such a great job in his presidential campaign in terms of organizing grassroots. Like I even served briefly as a precinct captain to get people out to vote for the Obama campaign, though I didn't make that many phone calls, but they had this really great social media and online way to log in and be I could do it all from home and just log in and get my call list, and it was a great system. But they didn't do that same thing once Obama was president. They didn't do that great a job organizing people to lobby Congress to get policies through. I mean, there is Organizing for America is the offshoot of the Obama campaign that still exists, and they do have like an email list, and they send out tweets and emails telling people what's important, but it's just not to the level it was in the campaign. And so I think Bernie Sanders is right about that, but I'm just not so sure that he's the candidate who can get it done. Although I want to show one more Bernie Sanders clip where he answers a question that does mention Donald Trump. I said earlier in the show that there were going to be no more mentions of Donald Trump, but I seemed a little hesitant to say it, and this is why, because here Donald Trump comes up again. It's just in the question from John Dickerson where it's kind of a weird question where he asked Bernie Sanders, why are you and Donald Trump the big hot things in politics right now? And this is the first question, I think, in the interview. And Bernie Sanders goes into his, talking points about the middle class and how they're being screwed by the rich, which is, I think, his best message and his best chance of success in the 2016 presidential campaign. I'll show that clip over here.
Candidate Bernie Sanders. Senator Sanders, you and Donald Trump are the two hottest things in politics right now. Why is that?
Well, I don't know about Donald Trump, but I think we are doing well. Hundreds of thousands of people are joining up on our campaign. We have 250,000 individual contributors averaging $35 apiece. We are drawing large crowds. And I'll tell you what, John, I think the American people understand that establishment politics and establishment economics are not working for the middle class and working families of this country, and they want real change. They want to end the absurdity of seeing the middle class of this country continue its 40-year decline, people working longer hours for lower wages, having the highest rate of childhood poverty of any major country on earth. All the while, there has been a massive transfer of wealth from the middle class to the top 0.1%, so that today almost all of the new wealth and income being created is going to the top 1%. People are saying enough is enough. That is not what this country is supposed to be about. We want to be able to send our kids to college. We want to be able to have decent childcare. We don't want to be the only major nation on earth that doesn't guarantee family and medical leave, paid sick time, paid vacation time. We want a government that starts representing working families and not just wealthy campaign donors, which is what we have right now. And I think that's a message that is resonating all across the country.
Senator,
I agree with Senator Bernie Sanders there that that message does resonate, and whether Bernie Sanders ends up being the Democratic nominee for 2016, I hope that message that you just heard from Bernie Sanders is the Democratic message in 2016. That's what's most important, and that may be even his purpose in running, although I know, like I said earlier, that there are a lot of people who are behind Bernie Sanders on the left right now who see him as a possible nominee. And stranger things have happened. I'm not saying it's impossible. I just maybe I'm just too much a slave to the conventional wisdom, or too cynical after being a witness to too many political cycles. But I just don't see Bernie Sanders as winning. I'd like to see him debate Hillary Clinton, and that's going to happen, and there will be some other candidates on the stage. And I want to show one clip from the person who is actually going to try to come at Hillary Clinton from the right. That's Jim Webb. I showed a clip of him earlier talking about Donald Trump. Here he is responding to a question from Baier, which is definitely the Fox News view of the Democratic Party, about how the Democratic Party under Obama has moved way to the left, and Hillary Clinton has repudiated Clintonism, and what do you think about this big move to the left by the Democratic Party? And you can see Jim Webb definitely is staking out his area in this contest to the right of Hillary Clinton, and certainly to the right of Bernie Sanders. And this is the last clip I'm going to show on the Democratic side of the 2016 race over here.
Well, to your point, Senator, you mentioned the Democratic race. In the Real Clear Politics average of polls, you're about 2.3%, and well behind the front-runner Hillary Clinton. You have an uphill climb against this Clinton machine. Most political analysts will tell you that Democrats have moved resolutely to the left, and that basically Hillary Clinton has renounced Clintonism, which really was the vital core of the center, used to be in your party. In a party that seems to thrill to Bernie Sanders and maybe long for Elizabeth Warren, who are the Jim Webb Democrats?
I believe we can bring a different tone to the Democratic Party. You're right, the party has moved way far to the left. And that's not my Democratic Party but in and of itself. We need to bring working people back into the formula. Next Saturday, in the far southwest of Virginia, there's going to be a medical clinic, a remote area medical clinic to take care of people who don't have medical insurance. It's out in the Wise County Fairgrounds. I hope Fox will go down there and take a look at that. They're going to take care of about 6,000 at least, if historical records hold, people with no medical care. They're going to pull about 3,000 teeth. And these are people who have been forgotten by both parties, and I think they need a voice.
So that makes it pretty clear that Jim Webb is staking out the right side of the Democratic field. I guess Lincoln Chafee is over there, kind of. And Martin O'Malley is trying to go to the left, just like Bernie Sanders has been pretty successful going to the left of Hillary Clinton. And how that's all going to shake out, I guess I'll have to go to one of the worst cliches, only time will tell, but I'll be interested in seeing how the Democratic debate goes. Not so much for the Jim Webb versus Hillary Clinton moments, but more for the Bernie Sanders versus Hillary Clinton moments, not personal attacks, but the issues that Bernie Sanders used to distinguish himself from Hillary Clinton. That'll be an interesting debate to see, just like the Republican debate on Fox News. I think August 5th is the date. But like I said, that's the last clip on the 2016 race. I want to get to some other important issues. The first one, I have about 10 clips, I think, on the imminent deal that the United States and several other powers are making with Iran on their nuclear program and lifting the sanctions on Iran. Last I checked, it was still imminent but not announced, but it looked like it was about to happen. I'm going to show first some general news coverage before I get to the politicians talking about their views on it. First is the report from, I think his name is it Kevin Corke? This is a Fox News reporter I haven't seen very often. Yeah, his name is Kevin Corke. And one of the things I think is kind of amusing about this coverage, you know, I like to start my topics with political comedy if I can, and Fox News always has a little bit. I'm not sure I have the wording exactly right, but Kevin Corke talks about how John Kerry went to great lengths to get this deal despite Iran's repeated violations. I don't know, is that really, that doesn't sound exactly like straight news reporting, but here's the Fox News report on the pending Iran deal from yesterday morning here.
The U.S., Iran, and those 5 world powers have given themselves until Monday to reach that deal. But there is reporting, as you point out, to suggest overnight that a deal could be imminent and announced perhaps as soon as tomorrow. Secretary of State John Kerry and his team have gone to great lengths to reach a deal despite Iran's repeated violations of UN sanctions and general destabilizing behavior in the Middle East. Now, this final push comes amid accusations from Tehran that the West is trying to change the terms of the deal at the 11th hour. And yes, there are still several major sticking points. Among them, Iran would like immediate relief from the UN arms embargo that dates back to 2006. They'd also like to limit access to their military sites during possible inspections. And perhaps most importantly, they would like to speed up sanctions relief because of the beleaguered economy there. Now, despite all the roadblocks, Secretary Kerry remains optimistic.
Very good meeting, positive. I think we're getting to some real decisions. So I would say, even as we have a few tough things to do, I remain hopeful.
Now, as you know, Bret, of course, the goal of the deal is to increase the time it would take for Iran to produce enough enriched uranium fuel for a single weapon, up from the current estimate of 2 to 3 months to about a year. And if there is a deal, that would limit Iran's enrichment program for at least about a decade, and that would certainly be a major development. Bret?
So that was how Fox News covered the supposedly imminent Iran deal. I looked in the comment section. No one has posted. I have over 90 live viewers, even though I'm doing this. I started the show a little after 3 a.m. my local time. I think I mentioned in the comment section for those who are watching live that I took my daughter to camp on Sunday, so that took several hours, and so I couldn't do my show at the regular time. I delayed it about 8 hours, and since I delayed the show, I'll be able to talk a little bit about the Greek bailout that was announced after I would normally do the show. But as far as I know, there hasn't been an actual Iran deal, so I'm still going to talk about it as like an imminent deal, although if you watched the Sunday morning shows, it seemed like almost inevitable there was going to be a deal announced sometime around the time I'm broadcasting, or in the next 12 hours, or even earlier than that, because I'm in California and Vienna is quite a few hours ahead of where I am. So I expect an Iran deal to be announced any moment now, but I want to show some more of the coverage from Sunday morning because it still sets the stage for what's going to be happening here in the United States for the next 60 days while Congress is going to be deciding whether they're going to vote against this deal. Although even if they vote against the deal, then President Obama can veto their disapproval. That's the way they worked out the legislation on this, so that it actually would take a 2/3 override of a presidential veto for Congress to actually disapprove of the deal. But I'll talk about that a little more after I show some more of the news coverage. Next, I want to show how CBS covered the pending Iran deal on Face the Nation. They had their reporter Margaret Brennan reporting from Vienna, talking in similar ways to what they said on Fox News, but without the negative spin about how the United States really wants the deal and Iran is repeatedly violated UN resolutions and has destabilized the world, or whatever it is the Fox News reporter said. This is the CBS version of that same report here.
CBS News Foreign Affairs correspondent Margaret Brennan is there. Margaret, are they close to a deal?
Well, John, U.S. negotiators say they should know by tonight whether a deal is possible. The Russian and Chinese foreign ministers are flying here to Vienna to help make some final decisions. Before he headed into Sunday Mass at the historic St. Stephen's Cathedral, Secretary Kerry told reporters that there are still a few tough things left to do. The handful of contentious issues include whether to phase out an arms embargo that prevents Iran from buying missiles and conventional weapons, also the duration of restrictions on Iran's nuclear development, and how to roll out sanctions relief. So far, negotiators have written about 100 pages of an agreement, and in a hopeful sign yesterday, Iran's state press released photos of top diplomat Javad Zarif confidently flipping through its pages. So the hope is to get a deal done in the next 36 hours. Diplomats say Secretary of State John Kerry has been here for a marathon 16 days of negotiations. They say he's obviously not rushing towards a deal, and point out that this is actually the most extended stay outside the U.S. by any Secretary of State in more than 30 years.
Margaret.
So that was the report from CBS's Margaret Brennan, which was an okay report, better than what you saw from that guy Kevin Corke on Fox News Sunday, without the Fox News spin on it. But I now want to show a few clips from Martha Raddatz on ABC's This Week with George Stephanopoulos. She actually reported on the pending Iran deal from Tehran, and she gave some really deep background on what's really going on in Iran, and she had an interview with one of the Iranian vice presidents, this woman whose name I will practice pronouncing while I show the first clip that doesn't have that woman in it. This is just it's actually about 5 minutes long. This is Martha Raddatz reporting both on what's going on in Vienna and then what's going on in Iran, and how Iran is not quite the place that it's sometimes portrayed in the United States. There's sort of a lot of really young people and a lot of people who want to westernize. I think one of the things in this clip I had never heard that I guess is true, according to Martha Raddatz, is that Iran is the nose job capital of the world. And I'll talk about all of that a little more after you see that. It's about 5 minutes long, but definitely worth watching here.
This could be a country on the brink of change. A high-ranking Iranian official telling us just a short time ago she is quite optimistic that a deal will come in the next 24 hours. In Vienna, where negotiators have been huddled for more than 2 weeks, Secretary of State John Kerry told reporters this morning he had a positive meeting with the Iranian negotiator, but there are still a few tough things to figure out, although the secretary says he remains hopeful. Major sticking points have been Iran demanding an end to an arms embargo, including on ballistic missiles, and how fast sanctions would be lifted. This, of course, is a nation that continues to back Syria's dictator, has called for the destruction of Israel, and still has several Americans imprisoned here. We have been here all week talking to the people of Iran, listening, watching. What we found is a nation of contradiction, struggling to change. Iran is vibrant, chaotic, and divided. From the chic Tehran shopping malls where westernized young women push the limits on the legal requirement to cover their hair.
Many years ago, you probably would have been arrested.
Yeah, sorry.
Yeah.
To the mass marches we saw this week, with the faithful shouting death to America and any nuclear deal along with it.
Obama, very bad. John Kerry, Ashton, not very bad.
It is a nation in a tug of war, its emboldened youth population battling against those clinging to the past. It is that divide that has made a nuclear deal so difficult here. For the hardliners in Iran, it is about religion and history. The U.S. support of the corrupt former Shah led to the seizure of the U.S. Embassy in 1979. Since the holding of those 52 Americans hostage for 444 days, a deep and bitter mistrust has continued. But in Iran, the vitriol against the West, and especially against Israel, goes well beyond just words. Over the years, despite efforts to stop them, officials say Iran's ability to build a nuclear bomb has become a very real threat. Candidate Barack Obama thought there was a new way to convince the Islamic Republic, which denies it wants a bomb, to end its atomic quest.
We need to talk to Iran and Syria.
The campaign promise became reality in 2013, the first direct communication between the U.S. and Iran since 1979. Years of punishing sanctions brought Iran to the negotiating table, and the chances for a permanent agreement down to the wire.
We are not going to sit at the negotiating table forever.
The U.S. has staked much on these negotiations, but there is even greater pressure here in Iran. While the hardliners have a powerful voice in this country, look again at these young people, at this young family welcoming American visitors. 70% of Iranians are under the age of 35, born after the revolution. What those who support a deal are hoping for, especially here in Tehran, is not only an opening up of cultural relationships with the rest of the world, but also economic gain. The sanctions prevent Iran not only from doing business with the U.S., but from most of the industrialized world. The Iranian stock market we visited expected to soar on announcement of a deal and eventual lifting of the sanctions.
I believe the sanctions are not fair to people because it's hurting the people, not the government.
You would like to see an agreement?
Because the people, they don't have any problem with another. Iranian people and American people.
And the sanctions have been difficult for everyone?
Yeah, it is difficult for everybody.
But not as difficult now as it could be if there is no deal. People here are expecting change and counting on it. New York Times reporter Thomas Erdbrink has lived in Iran for 13 years.
If there is a deal, we'll see at first
people dancing on the streets. It doesn't mean that they want to, change their country and have Starbucks and McDonald's on every corner. But it does mean that they can move towards a future without sanctions. Do business, get education, be in touch with the world.
But after all the talk and all the tension in Vienna, in the end, it will be up to this man, the supreme leader, Ayatollah Khamenei. If there is a deal, he will have approved it, and he will be the man who has to bridge the gap so evident in Iran today.
Like I said, I thought that was a much better report from ABC. I think that Martha Raddatz definitely won the Sunday morning shows this morning on the topic of the Iran negotiations, because that report from Tehran gave a lot more insight into what's going on in Iran. It showed some of the move toward modernization and Western values that are in not really shown in the U.S. media very much, but it did also show at the end there that the supreme leader of Iran is this religious Ayatollah who has the final say on the deal. So it's not like it's a progressive democracy, even though there are these people who really are interested in Western values. And I think some of what I was thinking was in that clip about the nose job capital of the world. It may be in this additional clip I'm going to show in a minute. But first I said I was going to show you this clip of the Iranian vice president. Her name is Masoumeh Ebtekar, if I'm pronouncing that correctly, which I'm probably not. Although one thing that's notable about her that is not in this clip but was mentioned later in the ABC This Week with George Stephanopoulos program is that she was actually went under the name Mary as a spokesperson for the hostage takers back in the Carter administration in the late 1970s, when the American hostages were taken in the Iranian Revolution. So, but here's her talking to Martha Raddatz in Tehran about why she's optimistic about a deal that, as I understand, is probably going to be announced any moment now. But here it is from yesterday morning on ABC's This Week with George Stephanopoulos in this clip.
Red lines, and even if there is a nuclear deal, no one expects our countries to become the best of friends. And as we said, many here are optimistic about a deal, including one of Iran's vice presidents, who we spoke to earlier this morning. And you are smiling this morning. Does that mean you are optimistic that there could be a deal anytime?
Yes, for sure. I'm quite optimistic.
Earlier in the week, there was a clear setback, and things got quite fiery, it appeared. The American officials say it was because the Iranian negotiators said that they wanted all sanctions off the table, including those about an arms embargo.
Iran deserves a role, just like any other country in the world in terms of trade, particularly being able to defend itself. The mentality of subjugation, superiority, one superior to the other, that has to change.
If there is.
So, like I said, that's the short clip I wanted to show that Martha Raddatz, from Martha Raddatz's interview with Masoumeh Ebtekar, if I'm pronouncing that right, one of the Iranian vice presidents and former spokesperson for the Iranian hostage takers of the big Iranian hostage crisis that I remember from the end of the Carter administration. I'm actually going to show a clip of Jimmy Carter a little later in the program, not talking about the hostage taking on Meet the Press. But first I want to show one more clip from Martha Raddatz reporting from Tehran, talking about how things have changed in Tehran or in Iran as a reporter. And I think this is the clip that talks about it being the nose job capital of the world, and I'll talk about that a little more if you see it here.
George, the change in Iran in a few short years is striking. When I first started coming here years ago, taping any scene on the street or talking to people about their views was nearly impossible. Not anymore. Yes, we needed a permit, but once we got one, the city opened up to all kinds of surprises. We have been free to roam the markets, the restaurants, the streets. What kind of music do you listen to?
Pop music. I love it. I love music, pop music.
To talk to just about anyone about anything.
So my telephone is iPhone, Apple.
Let me see your phone. Okay, what do you have?
Tango, Instagram, and Facebook.
What is the one thing you wish would change here?
They don't let us do whatever we want. I have problem with scarves, and I have problem with going out. I cannot go out easily.
But if progress is measured by the amount of hair revealed or the color it has become, we noticed a lot of progress on the streets of Tehran. And there is something else we saw again and again: bandages across the noses of many young women. An observation which led us here.
My nose is down, but now it's perfect. I like this.
Did it hurt?
No.
It's hard to believe, but conservative Iran is the nose job capital of the world. Here, having a newly sculpted nose is a status symbol. Dr. Salman Haj Mohammadi performs 7 surgeries a day. It looks, the noses that some of them choose look very Western.
Iranian nose, a little is a big nose, not like the European nose. And therefore, the Iranian girls likes have a surgery in her nose to get it to beauty.
Across town in a much smaller office, it is not nose jobs these young Iranians are seeking, but Steve jobs. Describe where you think Iran is in the tech world.
The biggest untouched market in the world.
Hamid Asidi has big dreams, co-founding a startup that sells audiobooks online. Kurt Vonnegut, Slaughterhouse-5, and
Steve Jobs.
Steve Jobs. What do people think of Steve Jobs?
Come on, you put a poster of Steve Jobs anywhere, it's the best market, that you can imagine.
Especially when you aren't paying for the book licenses. So you're making money?
Yeah.
A lot of money?
Yeah.
And Hamid and his partners are hoping to make more if the sanctions are lifted. But no one expects this country to change dramatically overnight or expects these cultural protests to change the serious issues that have left many people here frustrated and afraid. But for the young people we met, it's a start. Yes, it is a start, and that is it from Tehran this Sunday. While we wait,
I really appreciated that reporting from Tehran from Martha Raddatz. I have a long-running back-and-forth criticism, or as well as praise for Martha Raddatz reporting, where she reports on the military, that she's really close to the military and occasionally acts as a mouthpiece for their message, but also she gets really good access to the military. And I think she did a report from Jordan several weeks back, and now she's going into Tehran to get that great insight into what's going on in Iran and some of the changes since she's been reporting over the years. I really appreciated that, and I hope you all thought it was worth playing those 2 extended clips, sandwiching that clip of the Iranian vice president talking about her optimism for a deal that should be happening at any moment, as I said. And then once a deal is announced, the way we structured our political deal on it in the United States, it goes to the U.S. Congress, where they can pass a resolution of disapproval that the president can veto, and then the Congress would have to override the veto with a 2/3 vote, which I didn't think was very likely, but you can hear a lot of Republicans really skeptical about the deal, and then one Democrat skeptical about the deal in this next several clips I'm going to show. First starting with Chuck Todd on NBC's Meet the Press. I think he introduces it as like the saga of the negotiations because they've been going on so long, and then uses that as a way to tee up the Republican who's the head of the Senate Foreign Relations Committee, which will have a big say on how this is analyzed in the U.S. Senate. This is Senator Bob Corker responding to a fairly softball question from NBC's Chuck Todd on Meet the Press yesterday morning in this clip.
Seems like the endless saga that is the Iran nuclear negotiations. After grinding talks in Vienna, the latest deadline for a deal is Monday. It's the third extension in 2 weeks, and it seems the key sticking point is a dispute over lifting the international embargo against selling conventional weapons to Iran. Joining me now is the chairman of the Senate Foreign Relations Committee, Republican from Tennessee, Bob Corker. Senator Corker, welcome back to Meet the Press.
Chuck, good to be with you. Thank you.
Well, you are perhaps the single most important lawmaker when it comes to giving a thumbs up or a thumbs down on a deal. There's plenty of reports. The expectation is some provisional deal is getting close to being agreed to and announced tomorrow. Are you feeling better today than you did last week about Secretary Kerry as a negotiator?
Well, Chuck, it's no.
Okay.
I went over to the White House on Thursday night and had an update, but no, I mean, I think we've been on a downward trend for some time. We really crossed the Rubicon when we went from, during the JPOA, to dismantling their program to agreeing to enrichment. We've moved towards managing their proliferation, and there are some key issues that remain that I hope we will hold firm to. We've got to ensure that this is verifiable, that we have anytime, anywhere inspections,
right,
that they are accountable, that we know what their previous military dimensions were. We have access to all of their scientists. We know they were building a bomb. We just want to know how far they got in previous efforts. And then thirdly, we need to make sure it's enforceable. You know, likely Iran will cheat by inches, meaning they will just cheat. And over time, it's like boiling an egg. They end up with a nuclear weapon. So what are the repercussions for that? Obviously, there are other elements that are being brought in at this time. Right. I'm glad that they are taking their time because I believe the deadline was actually working to Iran's advantage. They started throwing in other elements. Right. But no, I'm concerned about where we're going.
So Senator Bob Corker is concerned, and it didn't sound like he was going to vote for the deal, but I don't know. But like I said, you don't need even a majority vote in the Senate to sustain or to fail to, or to sustain the presidential veto. President Obama would only need to get 34 votes in the Senate out of 100, right? Because they need 67 votes to override a presidential veto, and that came up in the answer from Senator Mitch McConnell, the Senate Majority Leader, and he was talking to Bret, guest hosting Fox News Sunday, and you'll see that Bret Baier just asked what would be an acceptable deal to you, and Mitch McConnell basically mirrored those talking points you heard in the Kevin Corke news story on the Iran deal, that John Kerry wanted to get any deal possible, and he also says that it's going to make Iran a nuclear threshold state, which they pretty much are already, and he just doesn't seem very confident about the deal, and even thinks that maybe President Obama won't be able to get 34 votes over in this clip.
What does an acceptable Iran deal look like?
Well, look, we already know that it's going to leave Iran as a threshold nuclear state. We know that. It appears as if the administration's approach to this was to reach whatever agreement the Iranians are willing to enter into. So I think it's going to be a very hard sell if it's completed in Congress. There was another option here. I would like to remind people, rather than spending multiple years trying to get one of the worst regimes in the world to agree to limit their nuclear capability, we could have ratcheted up the sanctions even further, because that's what brought them to the table in the first place. But the administration chose to go down this path. We're going to be interested in things like, will the Iranians reveal their past research and development? What have they done in the past on this subject? Is it verifiable? Will we be able to look at all of their military bases? And by the way, even if you're satisfied on all of that, Bret, there's all their other collateral activities, what they're up to in Syria, in Lebanon, in Gaza, in
Yemen.
Which is not a part of this deal.
Which is not a part of it. And apparently the ballistic missile capability, the ability to launch such a weapon to a target is not addressed as well. So this is going to be a very hard sell for the administration. They'll have to get at least 34 votes, assuming a resolution of disapproval passes. The president vetoes it. He'll have to get at least 34 senators to go forward.
But you know.
So that's the Republican leader of the U.S. Senate expressing skepticism that President Obama will be able to get 34 votes. You know, that would be all Democrats, and losing a bunch of Democrats. So that would be kind of weird, even if President Obama does eventually succeed in getting this Iran deal through. It would be kind of strange for a president to make a big deal like this and end up getting 60 votes against him in the U.S. Senate and still end up having the deal. That would be sort of a strange political situation. And what will be really interesting will be to see whether Hillary Clinton is willing to come out in favor of a deal if a deal is announced. She hasn't really shown that she's willing to come out and give positions when it's not completely necessary. I'm thinking about how she avoided coming out in favor or against giving fast-track authority to Obama to negotiate the Trans-Pacific Partnership when that was a big deal just a couple weeks ago. I now want to move on to the next Republican. That was the Republican leader of the Republican Senate. This is the Republican leader of the Republican House of Representatives saying very similar things, that he thinks that it would be better if President Obama's negotiators walked out of the negotiations, and no deal is better than a bad deal. And I'll talk about all that after you see that clip over here.
The Iranian negotiations that are going on. If the president backed out, would you say, good job? Would you applaud him?
I would.
And what next? What happens? Falls apart, and then what happens with that?
No deal is better than a bad deal. And from everything that's leaked from these negotiations, the administration has backed away from almost all of the guidelines that they set out for themselves. And I don't want to see a bad deal. And so if, in fact, there's no agreement, the sanctions are going to go back in place. And at some point, the Iranian regime, they're going to have to change their behavior, abandon their efforts to get a nuclear weapon, and stop being the largest state sponsor of terrorism in the world.
But what if neither of those two things happen?
Then we'll have a standoff. But it's a lot better than legitimizing this rogue regime, which is about, if in fact there's a deal, that's what will happen.
So, like I said, that's John Boehner, Speaker of the House, being very skeptical about this Iran deal that should be announced sometime right around now or in the next couple hours, from what I understand from watching the news programs, although I suppose there could be some last-minute delay or extension or even blow up in the talks, that because what you watch on the news programs doesn't always turn out to be true. But from what I watched on the news programs, I'd expect a deal pretty soon. And I want to show a couple more Republicans and then a Democrat talking about how this deal's going to fare in Congress. The next one I want to show is Senator Tom Cotton, who is the Republican who famously got together that letter from the U.S. Senate to the Iranian mullahs telling him not to trust Obama, and he still doesn't trust Obama, I don't think, as you can see over in this clip.
If a deal is passed, what can you do to stop it?
Well, we've been in this position before. In early April, they said they had an agreement in principle, but there was never a text to which they agreed. So we don't know if there's going to be a final agreement this weekend or not. But I think the United States has gone way too far down the road of making concessions to Iran. We have to remember the goal of these negotiations from the beginning. It was to stop Iran from enriching uranium and developing nuclear weapons capability. The UN Security Council has said repeatedly that they have no right to enrich uranium. That's been United States policy for 40 years. And the president has repeatedly granted them more concessions to let them enrich uranium. Now we're talking about what kind of access we're going to have to inspect their military sites, or whether they're going to get tens or hundreds of billions of dollars in a signing bonus. So I think whatever deal comes out of this weekend, it's going to be dangerous for the United States and dangerous for the world.
So we've gone from trying to prevent the nuclear program to just kind of trying to ban it.
Yes, the clear goal, as the president himself stated, was to stop Iran from developing nuclear weapons capability, not to manage it, not to limit it for a certain period of time, but to stop them from developing it.
So you've taken the position that if the United States just ratcheted up sanctions, walked away from a bad deal, ratcheted up sanctions, that Iran would buckle and come to the table with more favorable terms. What about an alternative explanation, which a lot of experts believe, which is that they would say, forget negotiations, we're going to race towards a breakout on a nuclear bomb? What do you do in that case?
Well, it really raises the fundamental question about the credible threat of military force. The president has said repeatedly over the years that the threat of force is on the table. Just last week in a hearing at the Armed Services Committee, the incoming chairman of the Joint Chiefs says the United States military has the ability to destroy Iran's nuclear facilities. That's not the first choice. That's not the preferred choice. But it has to be a choice that is credible for the Iranians to actually reach the goal that we had hoped, which is giving up their nuclear weapons capabilities.
President.
That's kind of a little scary at the end there. Senator Tom Cotton saying that we really need to make Iran believe we're going to bomb their nuclear program. That I think that there could be a lot of unintended consequences from that, but he's not the only Republican who is advocating that for that position, that we need to make Iran believe we're going to bomb them if we want to get a good deal. That's also what the Republican senator from South Carolina who's running for president, Lindsey Graham, said when he was over on CNN's State of the Union. I showed a clip of him earlier talking about Donald Trump. Here he is talking about why he thinks it's important Iran believes that he will bomb them, over in this clip.
Abroad to an issue I know that you've been very outspoken about, which is Iran. This week, you told Jake Tapper that as president, you would move to not only destroy Iran's nuclear program, but even take out its Air Force and Navy if they went too far with its nuclear program. Do you really think that Americans have the stomach for another war in the Middle East?
What I said is if the Iranians walk away from the table and they try to break out and get a nuclear weapon, if we can't end their program peacefully and they try to break out, as president, I would stop them. The worst possible nightmare for the world at large is the Ayatollahs in Iran with nuclear weapons. So if I'm president, to the Iranians, if you try to break out and get a nuclear weapon, we're going to stop you. We're going to put all the force on the table that's necessary to keep you from getting a nuclear weapon, because I'm afraid they would use it. If they get a nuclear weapon, the Sunni Arabs will want a nuclear weapon of their own, and we're on the road to a nuclear arms race in the Mideast. You know, when Dunford said that Russia was the biggest threat to the United States, I understand that to a point. But if Iran gets a nuclear weapon, they're the biggest threat to the world, and I would not allow that to happen, and they need to know that.
Now,
So, Iran, were you listening? That's Senator Lindsey Graham from South Carolina on CBS or on CNN State of the Union telling you you are going to be bombed if you do not stop your nuclear program, and Senator Lindsey Graham becomes president, although that is also not a very likely scenario. And I want to show one more clip on the topic of Iran. I showed a whole bunch of Republicans saying that they are very skeptical of this pending Iran deal, and like I said, President Obama does not need any Republican votes in order to sustain a veto of a congressional disapproval of the deal, but he does need to keep some Democrats, and one I do not think he's going to keep is one of the most anti-Iran deal Democrats in the U.S. Senate, Senator Bob Menendez. He was over on, I believe this is on This Week with George Stephanopoulos, on This Week with George Stephanopoulos, talking to George Stephanopoulos, answering a sort of softball question about whether he's anxious or not anxious. This was after all those Martha Raddatz reports, and here's Bob Menendez saying he is anxious and not sounding like he's going to vote for this deal over in this clip.
You just saw that optimism in Iran. Does that make you hopeful or anxious?
Well, it makes me anxious. Because what a deal looks like is incredibly important. And the problem here, George, is that we have gone from preventing Iran having a nuclear ability to managing it. And what we are doing is basically rolling back sanctions for not rolling back Iran's illicit nuclear infrastructure, but rolling back sanctions for verification.
But according to the administration, putting it off for 10 to 15 years, can any other policy do better than that?
Well, I think we started off with the wrong premise. We did not test the premise, can you get some of that infrastructure to actually be removed? Because at the end of the day, that's where we started. We started off with the premise that Iran could not keep its nuclear infrastructure, at least all of it. So we still have a plutonium reactor, reconfigured, but still a plutonium reactor. We were originally told by Secretary Kerry that is either going to be dismantled by them or it will be destroyed by us. We have a uranium enrichment deep inside of a mountain. That doesn't happen for a peaceful civilian program. That's going to stay, again, reconfigured to less uranium enrichment. So the question is, even President Obama said that under this potential deal, in 12, 13 years, they will have a pathway towards a nuclear bomb should they choose to do so. And how this deal structures our ability to make sure that if that's the best deal you're going to get, what type of verification inspection regime, is it still going to be any time, any place for the International Atomic Energy Administration? What type of sanctions relief are we giving? And at the end of the day, I hope that notwithstanding a deal, that the president makes a very clear statement to Iran that as it relates to the future, we cannot accept Iran having a nuclear weapon, period. That's the premise we started on. That's the premise we should finish
Sounds
on.
like you're...
So I don't know what you think, but I think that Senator Bob Menendez of New Jersey is not going to vote for this Iran deal in the U.S. Senate, assuming there is a deal. It's supposedly about to happen. And one of the things that I did find out that did happen since the Sunday morning shows that I recorded all the clips from was this Greek bailout. So last week I didn't end up showing any clips on the Greek bailout, even though there was a brief discussion on ABC's This Week with George Stephanopoulos. They even had an interview with that Greek finance minister who then resigned like a day or two later. When the referendum came out against the terms of the bailout that had been offered, and apparently just a couple hours or right around the time I started the show, or a couple hours before I started the show, I saw that there was a Greek bailout deal reached between Greece and the European Union. I think the EU spokesman said that they had come up with terms, and I don't know the exact terms, but I want to show the one clip covering the Greek bailout that was on the Sunday morning shows. Again, there was very little coverage. The one place they did cover it was over on Fox News Sunday, although I think Fox News has a special reason to cover Greece that I will discuss after you watch the report on the bailout that was supposedly going to happen and then actually did happen, as reported on Fox News Sunday. The reporter's name, I think, is Amy Kellogg in this clip.
Amy.
Hi, Bret. Well, on Friday, it really did look like Greece and its creditors were very close to a deal. But, Bret, it turns out that is not the case at all. However, Greek Prime Minister Alexis Tsipras has just been quoted as saying that he is willing to compromise. Now, where in the past in these negotiations the hurdles had really been technical, this time they are being held up on the issue of trust and concern that the Greek government simply won't do what it has promised. Now, trust, and particularly from the German side, has eroded since the Greek Prime Minister called a referendum last Sunday here. Voters said no to a package of austerity measures, but less than a week later, their government turned around to the creditors and said, okay, yes, to pretty much the same sort of package. And that is another reason why credibility is becoming more of an issue in these last-minute talks. It being Sunday here, Greeks have taken to the beach in large numbers, many of them say, because the sea and the sun are the only things that haven't been taken from them and that are free. They have seen their economy shrink by a quarter in recent years, and with that, cuts in pension, loss of jobs, and an ever-fraying social net. Bret, Eurozone finance ministers are meeting in Brussels. Later on today, Eurozone leaders will meet. It had been hoped that a deal would be clinched by the end of today. But it is actually looking increasingly likely, many say, that the creditors will want to see the Greek parliament actually enact some legislation on reforms before further debt relief is agreed. Bret.
Well, apparently that's not true because a deal has been reached. I think what the EU spokesman called it was an agreement. He made like this joke that it was a very strange joke in the announcement I saw on CNN a couple hours ago. But I think the reason that Fox News likes to concentrate on this whole Greek bailout thing is Republican candidates, and even Bobby Jindal, in a clip I didn't show, talked about this in his interview on Fox News Sunday, about how America is going the way of Greece because our public pensions are too high and our taxes are too high and our public benefits are too high, and we have to do more of the austerity that they're making Greece go through. But the analogy to Greece doesn't really fit the United States very well because the problems Greece is having, you know, it's all those things that I mentioned, but it's also because they can't print their own money, and that's why they have to make the deal with the EU. If they weren't on the common currency, they could do deficit spending without having to make a deal with Germany. And here in the United States, we don't have that problem. It's more like if there was a U.S. state that was in bankruptcy. And of course, that's not impossible, although our economy is doing significantly better than the European economy, and it's because we didn't stick to as much austerity as they did, I think. But that's just my opinion. You can let me know what you think down in the comment section. That's the only clip I have on Greece from the Sunday morning shows. It wasn't covered very closely on this week or last week. I do want to have a couple clips for you. So the Confederate flag came down from the flagpole outside the South Carolina state capitol earlier this week, and that was a big deal, and it was fun to watch on TV. And I'm going to show a clip from NBC's Meet the Press where Chuck Todd showed that, and he had his interview with South Carolina Governor Nikki Haley, who I think is actually more likely to be that woman vice president in the 2016 Republican, for the 2016 presidential nominee for the Republicans, much more so than Carly Fiorina, you know, because she is a woman, which apparently Republicans are looking for a woman to attack Hillary Clinton. But I think she would be a much better choice than Carly Fiorina. I mean, not better for the Democrats, but better for the Republicans. And here you see Chuck Todd raise an important issue about the Confederate flag, about how it's really symbolic, and then there's some real issues, and Nikki Haley is willing to talk about some of those issues like body cameras, but when it comes to issues like voter ID, you can see she's still a staunch Republican over in this clip.
It's a fascinating moment to watch for someone like me who's covered presidential politics for a couple of decades, thought this was intractable. Yeah. And to watch you and Senator Scott and Lindsey Graham, you sort of linked arms and you sort of dared the legislature to not do this, and when you challenged them to do it. What do you take away from this and pushing an agenda going forward that is perhaps dealing with educational standards that are different for whites and blacks in South Carolina?
We actually started doing this a couple of years ago because I so wanted to make sure we were lifting up everyone. So we changed the way we funded education. We now give more money for areas of poverty. We now have reading coaches. We now have technology for those areas that school districts can't afford it. You know, we were the first state in the country to have a body camera bill. We've already been moving in this direction. So this was like a nice move forward to say, you know, we're not that state that everybody thinks we are. We actually are a state where we love our God, we love our country, we love our state, but we love each other.
You know, one of the issues of Clemente Pinckney was the voting rights laws, and that's been a big controversy with a lot of African Americans, particularly, and with a lot of Republican governors. Do you see the issue differently now? Do you understand what some African Americans believe these voter ID laws end up being a way to single them out or disenfranchise them?
You know, the flag coming down was a moment that I felt like needed to happen. That doesn't mean that I philosophically changed the way I think about other things. I've never seen the voter ID as a racial issue. For whites, for blacks, for Asians, for anyone. What I see is it's an issue where people prove who they are. And I think that's something very important to our democracy. It's important to America. And I think that having to show a picture ID when you get on a plane and having to show a picture ID when you buy Sudafed, you absolutely should have to show picture ID to vote. And what we've done in South Carolina is make sure that it's easy for people to vote, that we don't make it hard for anyone. But we think that's an important part to the process.
So if you think that Governor Nikki Haley of South Carolina is turning liberal because she supported bringing down the Confederate flag, I think that voter ID answer definitely shows that she still is a Republican. And I don't know, is the right to vote like the right to Sudafed? You can let me know what you think down in the comments section. I think I still have about 90 people watching live, or if you're watching as a recorded show, of course. Before I leave the issue of the Confederate flag and race, I was, happy to see that the Republican governor of South Carolina has come out for racial equality, even if not for full voting rights without restrictive voter ID laws. And here it is, 2016, and a Republican governor in the South has done that. I want to show a Democratic governor, or former Democratic governor from the South, former Democratic governor of Georgia, and former President of the United States, Jimmy Carter, was over on This Week with George Stephanopoulos, talking to George Stephanopoulos about race. And in that conversation, you can see George Stephanopoulos, or ABC's This Week with George Stephanopoulos, played a clip of Governor Jimmy Carter as governor of Georgia coming out for stopping segregation way back in the early 70s. And I think that was also important leadership, probably more important leadership than Nikki Haley's leadership on the Confederate flag. And then Jimmy Carter has something to say about why President Obama didn't bring more racial harmony over in this clip.
Flags falling in South Carolina across the South, Carter reflects on America's vexed history with race and how growing up with black friends in the segregated South helped shape his career.
The race issue has been a major factor in my life all the way through.
You had that declaration right after you were elected governor.
That's right.
I say to you quite frankly that the time for racial discrimination is over.
And you look back to 1971 and think, on the one hand, we've come so far, elected an African-American president, but these problems still so persistent.
Well, we kind of took it for granted that we would eliminate the concept in America that whites were superior in some way to black people, and I think we let our guard down.
Are you surprised that the election of President Obama didn't lead to even more progress on this issue?
I think in a strange and I'd say unpleasant way, this kind of resurrected some animosity among people who were white and thought that whites should be superior.
No.
That's kind of an understatement, I think. If you are a watcher of politics like I am, and I know many of my viewers are, to say that there's been a backlash against President Obama by those who thought whites should be superior to blacks in the United States. I think that is not the entirety of the anti-Obama sentiment in the United States, but it's definitely an important strain of, and some of the most vociferous anti-Obama sentiment comes from people who have those feelings. And I also thought it was fun to watch that clip from, I guess it was 1971, Governor Jimmy Carter coming out against racial discrimination in a time when it was hopefully a lot more divisive than it is now, although I guess it's still somewhat divisive. And like I said, that's the last clip I want to play on the race issue. I only have one more clip I want to play before I end the show. Hopefully I'm maintaining some coherence here, as this is a very strange time for me to do the show. I started a little after 3 a.m. and now it's after 5 a.m. and that makes me a little bit, I don't know, maybe a little less on point than maybe I am usually. I don't know, maybe I'm not usually on point on all the clips, but there were several developments on cyber warfare and cyber attacks this last week. There was this one day where the New York Stock Exchange went down for a little while, and United Airlines had a problem, and the Wall Street Journal had a problem, and especially Fox News was starting to talk about it like some big cyber attack conspiracy. And then I saw Shepard Smith came out and said, "Don't make people scared for no reason" on Fox News. It was kind of cool, and maybe I should have taken that clip, but I'm not going to take that clip. But I do want to show a story that Pierre Thomas did on ABC's This Week with George Stephanopoulos, talking also about these the more revelations about this hack supposedly from China against federal workers, where like 20 million federal workers had their personal data taken, and also about how the United States is trying to respond to cyber warfare in the final clip for my broadcast this early morning in California here.
Back.
A cyber attack of epic proportions with extraordinary national security implications. 22 million federal workers, contractors, and their associates exposed. The U.S. Office of Personnel Management hit by hackers targeting databases storing critical information from government background checks. Among the victims, the FBI director himself.
I'm sure the adversary has every place I've ever lived since I was 18, every foreign travel I've ever taken, all of my family, their addresses.
The primary suspect, according to U.S. officials, the Chinese government.
Only the imagination limits what a foreign adversary could do with detailed information about a federal employee's education, career, health, family, friends, neighbors, and personal habits.
The OPM director resigned Friday amid the fallout, as the nation comes to grips with a new era where federal agencies are under siege.
They're all juicy targets for an adversary, so we worry night and day.
We were at Homeland Security's Secret Center for Fighting the Cyber War just days before the first OPM breach was detected.
In a given day, how many attempts or attempted attacks are there on the U.S. government agencies?
My estimate would be the tens of thousands.
Phyllis Schneck said the Cyber Center helped the OPM identify the hack, then used a sophisticated new monitoring system that revealed it was wider and deeper than first thought.
So the board you're looking at is a system that we call Einstein. Einstein. We have sensors in government agencies, and we're able to show and understand how much traffic comes in and out, what looks wrong at a certain time.
But while Einstein may be improving cybersecurity, critics say the U.S. government's defenses are woefully inadequate.
$80 billion on information technology, and it stinks. It doesn't work.
The nominee to head the Joint Chiefs of Staff says the military will respond.
My role will be to provide the president with a full range of options to deal with these cyber attacks.
A new era of cyber warfare now fully engaged. For This Week, Pierre Thomas, ABC News, Washington.
So that is the one clip I wanted to show you on the developing information on this cyber attack against the Office of Personnel Management, which has been an ongoing story. That's the last clip of tonight, though, of the show tonight, but I don't think it's going to be the last clip on this cybersecurity issue that I'll be showing on my Sunday clip roundups, because I think that's actually going to be some legislation coming out of Congress, one of the few things that has some chance of passing in the last 2 years of the Obama administration. But I want to let you know that the reason that I started the show late was because I had to take my daughter to summer camp, which took up several hours of my time on Sunday. But as a result, I may have some more free time this week, and I'm hoping to make an edited, produced video that I've been working on, I think since April, criticizing this Fox News story on a Madison, Wisconsin law that said you can't discriminate against atheists, and that drove Fox News crazy. And hopefully I'll be able to post a draft of that video in the next couple days for my patrons on Patreon. I like to give them a chance to comment on drafts, and then I will have the final version up hopefully by Friday morning at the latest. It's something about I don't have the title available right now, but you can look for that both if you want to become one of my patrons on Patreon, there's a little eye if you hover your mouse over the video in this corner that lets you give direct donations through YouTube fan fundraising and also become a patron. I'm almost 3/4 to my $400 a month goal. When I get to the $400 a month goal, which is like $100 per week for each of these live videos, I will either have only the one commercial at the beginning or one commercial every hour. Since I'm about 3/4 of the way, I'm keeping my commercials to only every half hour on the current videos. I hope that's not too annoying to have to watch a commercial every half hour. And if I get up to my patron goal of $400 a month from my patrons, I will cut the commercials to no more than once per hour. And this show, unfortunately, has been going for like 2 hours and 15 minutes almost now. It's one of my longest shows ever. And as I said, I'm very, very tired from doing this starting at around 3 in the morning. Now it's almost 5:30 in the morning. And I do appreciate all of you who joined me live. I've been reading your comments. It kept me company while I was showing the clips. And next week, my show should be right around the regular time, hopefully right at the regular time of 6:30 p.m. Pacific. So I hope for those who join me at the weird time, you consider joining me at the normal time, although I know that probably people who can join me at 6:30 p.m. Pacific on Sunday probably can't join me at 3 a.m. Pacific. It's not really the same people, although I think I saw a couple people who are regulars, but some new people in there as well. So thanks all of you. I hope you enjoyed the 35 clips I picked out for you, and it left you starting your week off a little bit more informed, or at least a little bit more informed about what the corporate media here in the United States thinks is important. And I guess until I have a chance to upload another video, I will just be seeing you all around the internet.